We all have those 9,000 reasons why we can't do the next right thing. So having someone walking beside us, whether it's a personal recovery assistant, whether it's a sponsor, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a sober living, there's lots of paths to recovery and there's lots of support available out there. It doesn't have to be one way, but just be willing to open yourself to a way to get that support.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to yet another episode of I Love Being Sober. My name is Tim Westbrook, and I am the CEO and founder of Camelback Recovery here in the always sunny and always sober Scottsdale, Arizona, where my team and I, over the course of many years, have helped thousands of people on their path to recovery. We started this show because there's so much misinformation about addiction treatment, mental illness, and recovery in general. There's so much more to recovery than just going to inpatient treatment, seeing a therapist, and going to 12-step meetings. All of those things are important, and AA saved my life. However, to find long-term recovery and live happy, joyous, and free, there's a lot more to it than just stopping the drinking, stopping the drugs, stopping the sex addiction, or stopping any addictive behavior for that matter. To live a new life, a person needs new, healthy lifestyle habits, amongst many other things. Typically, this includes new eating habits, new sleeping habits, new exercise habits, new hobbies, new interests, new friends. Self-care becomes a priority, and the list goes on. Those are the types of things that we talk about here on this show, amongst many other things. And today, I'm here with Nanette Zumwalt. Nanette is currently recognized as one of the top interventionists and an industry expert, both nationally and internationally. She holds credentials as an international certified alcohol and drug counselor, level 2 clinical supervisor, an international certified criminal justice professional, a certified intervention professional, and she is a member of the Association of Intervention Specialists. Nanette also currently serves on the board of directors for the National Association of Addiction Treatment Programs. She is a past board member of the Association of Intervention Specialists, and she is a current member in good standing with a large variety of related organizations. Today, Nanette and I will talk about saving lives through interventions and individual recovery support services like Safe Passage, coaching, sober companion, and case management. Nanette, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Tim. Good morning and happy Friday.
Good morning. Happy Friday. It's a beautiful day. So let's dig into it. Tell me a little bit about your background and how you got interested in helping people struggling with addiction and mental health.
Well, I think similar to many people who get drawn to this field and drawn to the area of healing, it's through our own stories, right? So I grew up in a family of a very loving, happy family who also struggled with addiction. And my oldest sister, I was part of an intervention early on with my oldest sister when I believe I was about 9. And I remember someone coming into our home and helping us. And I remember even as a young child thinking, who is that person? What just happened? How did that happen? And it intrigued me from a very young age. And I think that was the start of my own recovery journey.
So you were 9. How old was your sister?
15.
Okay. So 9 and she was 15. And what was she struggling with?
She was struggling with addiction. She was struggling with substance abuse and behavioral issues. And our family was in chaos.
Did you ever struggle with addiction yourself?
I did. It looked different. In a family, when you have an identified client or identified person that is the focus in the area, the others tend to kind of get blurred. So in my family, I was functioning. I looked like a rock star. Things were going well. A lot of things were, kind of that duck under the water, right? On the top, I was floating softly, and on the bottom, my feet were paddling, a million miles an hour.
Right. Okay. So that was your first That was your first experience. And then what?
And then our family, our family fell apart, and we grew up and we separated. I went to college, and did what I thought everyone did in college, drank and partied and, ran amok. And I thought that that's what you did in college. That was part of the role of college, and it worked until it no longer worked. Um, I met and have been with my wonderful husband since high school. He was a college athlete, and he was kind of my rock and my solution. And he was the one that said, we're not doing this anymore. Things are going to be different for us. And we moved back home to Southern California after college, and began to work in the addiction and mental health fields, and pulled ourselves together.
So when he said, we're not doing this, it's going to be different for us, what exactly did he mean?
Well, as you can imagine, my husband also grew up in a family of addiction, alcoholism. And we both had enough awareness to know we wanted things to be different for us. We didn't want to continue to grow up and live in a household similar to the way we were raised.
Give me your definition of, because intervention is one of your specialties, obviously. What is your definition of an intervention?
So to me, I love working with families. Where people heal is in family systems, and it really takes a village. And so for me, working with the families to create a plan. An intervention is a well-coordinated and thought out presentation of a plan, right? You have a professional there to guide what is the solution going to be? What is the next step? And you present that well thought out, organized plan to the person who's really suffering and really struggling. And you do that as a family system. And family systems look different, right? They could be family of origin, they could be your work family, they could be your family of choice, but they're the people who love you most in the world, people who are going to stand by you in the long run and support you and be part of your solution. So really, an intervention is a presentation of a plan.
It's the presentation of a plan. How important is it for a family to be involved with an intervention and to follow directions?
It's very important. As I said, your family are the people that are going to be there through the thick and the thin, through the long. And again, definitions of family vary, right? So it could be your family of origin, could be your family of choice, could be your work family, but it's those around you. There's 4 reasons people go to treatment. Daryl Bullock taught me this a long time ago. And we call it the 4 L's, right? Liver, lover, legal, and livelihood. And that's really where the leverage, where the persuasion, where the ability to get someone into some space of willingness comes from. And the lover is the family system. And it's so important that they're part of the process. It's so important that they hear and understand what that process requires and that they participate in the best way they can. Or sometimes it's important that they aren't a member of the initial intervention team. If they can't be part of the solution in that moment, we'll invite them back into the process at a later time. But there is times when different family members, for various reasons, their own emotional stability, their own wellness, their own willingness, maybe can't be a part of that exact moment, of that exact presentation of the plan. But it is important and very valuable if they're part of the overall solution.
Right. And I've heard this, and I'm sure you've heard this as well. It's the addict. That's the person that needs the help. I don't need the help. And many times, more often than not, the family also needs to do work. And so how do you get the family to realize that they are part of the problem, and they also have to do the work?
Right. Well, I think, for me, it's about inclusion. It's about welcoming them into the solution. And when you come from an education system and not a shaming and a blaming or a pointing fingers, most of the family, it's a fear base, right? I don't have a problem. I'm not the one with the needle in my arm. I'm not the one drinking too much. I have a job. I go to work. But helping them understand the dynamics of the family system and the exchange between them and how the family system heals often creates a level of willingness. And then they're willing to at least investigate their part. And, that's what I invite them to do, is create some awareness and open a door and ask them to at least be willing to investigate what we're talking about, what we're inviting them into, very similar to their loved one. And, if they can't do it for themselves, do it for their loved one. And oftentimes that brings them to the table.
And what does it look like for example, a person that's struggling with alcohol or drugs? They can go to an AA meeting. There's tons of AA meetings. They can find a sponsor. They can work the steps. They can go to meetings every single day. There's lots of people that are in recovery, and it's really easy. I mean, that above therapy and IOP and rehab. Where does a family member go because they don't have an addiction problem, right? Where do they go to start doing the work?
Right. So there's lots of community-based. I think the pandemic, there's some silver linings in this pandemic. I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. Really creating virtual spaces for people who wouldn't have normally, similar to AA, people who normally wouldn't have walked through those front doors that first time. It's funny, you say it's easy. There's so many of them. It's easy.
Right.
And we think it's easy because it's the norm in our world and it's what we do. But for many people, it's far from easy to walk through that front door of AA or walk through that front door of Families Anonymous or Codependent No More or, any of these other support meetings for families. It's overwhelming and it's not easy. So Zoom and some of these other virtual platforms have made it easier, have made it less frightening and more available to, I think, families that may not have been willing to have that initial experience and to understand the strength and the support and the education that they can receive in those rooms or in those chat rooms or, on those Zoom calls or in those therapy offices. So it's really been a silver lining.
And I think, to your point, Zoom has made it much easier. Telehealth has made it much easier and much less scary for someone to go to a meeting and get involved. However, on the flip side of that, you really don't get the full experience because it's really hard to connect with other people via Zoom, because a big part of going to a meeting is the connections before the meeting and the connections after the meeting and the coffee after the meeting and the lunch after the meeting before the meeting, the meeting after the meeting, right? Like those don't happen when we're all in Zoom.
Correct. But it was a space to begin. It was a space to, when the world was closed and there was nothing else, it was a place to at least sit and be part of. So yes, I agree. You don't connect in a virtual world. And it makes it much more difficult, and live and in person is really the best solution. But if you have someone that lacks that willingness or has an immense fear or lack of understanding, and that's where they're willing to put the toe in the water, I welcome that. However you're going to first get there. And maybe someone on that Zoom meeting says, hey, do you want to meet for coffee? Or, hey, have you been to this breakfast spot down the street? And that gets you into your first face-to-face meeting. And then you're off and running.
Right. And to your point, the road to recovery starts with a single step.
Yeah. However they're willing to walk to the space and to open themselves up for that, I welcome that.
Which I think is one reason why it's important to find, even if the meeting's via Zoom, it's important to find a Zoom meeting that's local so that you actually can connect and say, hey, I can relate to what you're struggling with. Do you want to grab a coffee or something like that?
Right.
Okay. What is a certified intervention professional?
So, gosh, how long's it been now? Time has been in a warp. All of
Yeah.
2020 disappeared. So probably about 4 or 5 years ago, the CIP certification was created out of Pennsylvania. We really, as professionals, wanted to professionalize the
Right.
service and professionalize the field. Intervention for a long time was, one sober person to another struggling person. There wasn't a lot of structure or guidelines or regulations around it, and the CIP was created. AIS, the Association of Intervention Specialists, worked very hard to create that certification and establish that level of professionalism. And I think it's been in place, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years, but Tim, it could be 8 or 9.
Right. And I know you've been in the business for 3 decades or over 3 decades. So you've been around for a long time. And I know that you were one of the pioneers in creating intervention certifications, because it's like you wanted to, I guess, bring the standard up. Or I guess why let's hear from you. Why is it that that an interventionist, why is it that needed to become more professional as opposed to just one sober person going out and getting a person to go to treatment or go to an AA meeting or whatever?
So I was just one of a group of many that were interested in creating professionalism in this field. Because as I said, back in, the late 90s, early 2000s, it really was unregulated, unsupervised, and there was a lot of great things happening. Don't get me wrong. A lot of sober people have saved millions of other people's lives, just one person to another. So I don't want to take away the power of that at all. That in itself is amazing. But when we just talked about family systems, and we just talked about groups of individuals. And, it's really important to have education and have experience when you're walking into a family system and you're trying to navigate and direct and put together a plan for that. Having that level of professionalism that people can understand why they should listen to you. When I walk into a room with a surgeon or an attorney or the CEO of a major corporation, why should they listen to me? Who am I? What allows me to lead this group and to direct them? And so there has to be some structure, some guidance, some professional ethics and professional standards to support this and have it be a true professional.
Right. And I guess all interventionists are not created equal, as you know. There's
Right.
lots of different and at least there are some standards, and there are some things that need to happen for a person to become certified and a legitimate professional interventionist.
Correct.
Which, having that in place is so important.
Right.
And that's why it's become a more professional.
Right.
So, moving on, what gives you the right to claim you are an expert in helping individuals take the first step to recovery?
So as I just said, I think it's a combination of education, certifications, trainings, and experience. And so, after I became certified and after I finished my trainings, I sat second chair with another professional for a very long time. And I sat second chair with as many professionals as would allow me to sit second chair, because I wanted to continue to grow and learn and hone the craft. Intervention's really an art form, like many other things, to practice, right? You take your skills, you take the training skills, and you're not building widgets. You're working with families, and it's really important, and it's really powerful, and it's very emotional. And the more training and certification and education and experience you can get, hopefully the better you will become, and the more of an asset you will be for families that are really struggling.
What specific incident inspired you to be so passionate about helping individuals that are willing but not able? Where were you? What happened? Who were you with?
So I don't know that it ever was an incident. I was that kid that I did therapy through theater. I volunteered as a teenager at a local, it was called the Albertan Sitting Home at the time. It's where foster children went. It's the kids that were taken away from their families. And I was part of a theater group, and we would go in there and do, finger puppets and different, it was called therapy through theater. And then I became a peer mentor, and I went in with a group into high schools when no means no on date rape and just say no, the Nancy Reagan age, just say no
Yeah.
to drugs.
Yeah.
And so I've always been that person who has wanted to be part of helping other people and being of service to other people. I thought that I was going to grow up to deliver babies. I was going to be a midwife and deliver babies, and God just planned for me. I think it's been in me from a young age. Again, maybe that's part of my family system. Maybe that's part of my sister's story, or my own story. But I don't know if there was ever a specific incident that I could put my finger on.
Who should consider hiring an interventionist?
Anybody that's struggling with a loved one with addiction. Anyone that's struggling with a coworker with addiction. I always encourage families to have initial conversations. Have you addressed this with a person? Have you spoken to a person? How has that conversation gone? But most people, some people have a conversation and there's a level of willingness and there's a breakthrough and their loved one goes on to treatment. But for the majority of people, really having a professional guide and support them through this process, help them with their words, help them with the plan, create a safe container, a safe space for this journey into healing to happen. They need a guide. They need someone to walk them through that process.
Right. It's like they've never done it before.
Right.
I mean, it's just like, hey, I've never done this before. Let me go and do it.
Right. And most often addiction leads to an unhealthy family system. So the communication skills, the way they communicate, the way they don't communicate, that has developed around and in addiction. So what would make it suddenly healthy because they wanted to do something different? They need guidance and support, and, be guided through that process.
So if someone thinks that maybe they want to hire an interventionist, or they're thinking an intervention is appropriate, like what's the first step for them?
Really to, get some references, get some referrals, talk to if they are seeing a therapist in the community, if there are some treatment centers they're familiar with or hospitals they're familiar with, whatever they're comfortable with in their system, get some referrals for some professionals. There's not a lot of people that are savvy enough to go, I'm going to go online and look at the Association of Intervention Specialists, and I'm going to find the best fit for me. So they're going to go to their community providers, right? Their church, their temple, their schools, their hospitals, their doctors, and find the resources and the community professionals, get references, and then start interviewing, because, not everyone's a great fit for everyone.
Right.
So get on the phones and start calling and asking those questions and seeing who you connect with and who answers those questions in a way that is relatable to you and brings you some relief.
And then how long does it take? So someone starts making phone calls, they start doing the research. How long does it take for the actual intervention to happen? And then after the intervention, like how long is that typical process?
So we work with our families usually for up to a year, because part of our intervention process, and we haven't spoken about this, but part of our intervention process is an aftercare. So, it's not just walking through the doors of treatment. It's not just getting your loved one into treatment. It's now what? How do you handle those phone calls when they call from treatment and they want to come home? Or they call and say, I haven't seen the doctor and they're not feeding me, and everyone else here's a heroin addict and I'm only going to get worse here. How do families manage those phone calls? How do they manage, as we talked about earlier, their own entrance into healing and their own steps into recovery? And then how do they implement all those new skills, thoughts, and ideas that their loved one learned in treatment? How do they put that into an active recovery plan, after treatment? So we work with our families for a length of time. It's not just the conversation getting someone into the front door of treatment.
Right. And I like that you point that out. And we're going to talk about hired power here in later in the show. I like that you bring that up. It's a year. Recovery's not just the intervention. It's not just getting them to treatment. Right. And there was a study done at Stanford, and I think we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day. 90% of those thoughts are subconscious. 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had the previous day. So we're programmed to live life a certain way, and we have these same thoughts every single day. So it's a process to change our thoughts, to change our thinking, to change the way that we act and the way that we respond, to change our behaviors. It doesn't just happen by going to inpatient treatment where you're in a bubble, you're protected. It's a whole process. So I love that you guys stay engaged for a year. I think that's really important for people to hear.
Yeah. And those thinking processes aren't just for the person struggling with substance use and mental health. It's the whole family system. We've always done it that way. We never do it this way. We've always communicated this way, or we've never spoken about that. We hear that all the time. And how do they learn to do that differently if they aren't guided through the process?
Right. And I think your family is your family. Your family's that's not going to change. And I mean, you could separate yourself from your family, or you can work on the family system, and the family can do the work as well. And that's why one of the things that we say, it's new friends, new hobbies. So it's like changing your environment and changing the people that you surround yourself with. And that's why, like, my friends today look completely different than my friends looked like before I got clean and sober.
Right.
Because I want my life to look different. But my family's still the same. My family's not going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's the truth, right, Tim? I mean, we can guide everybody, and we can educate, and we can give new tools and new skills. And that doesn't mean people are going to use them. So sometimes part of a family gets well, sometimes just a member of the family gets well, and sometimes you can see a whole system change. But it's a lot of work, and not everyone is willing to show up to do all that work on a daily basis to really create lasting change. And that's the hope of the professionals. The hope is to provide the tools, give them the platforms to get well, but not everybody comes to the table.
Right. I think I don't remember who I was talking to. We, as alcoholics and drug addicts, we're kind of lucky. We're kind of lucky because we're forced to have to do the work. Whereas people that are not affected by addiction or mental illness or alcoholism, they're just cruising along, and they're many times there's really no reason to start doing the work. So their norm is their norm, and like, hey, I'm not causing problems. I'm not losing my job. I'm not losing relationships. I'm not happy. However, why would they do the work? They really haven't hit a bottom.
Or they're skating along, and there's another person in the family that isn't doing as well. So they look good in comparison, similar to me.
Yeah.
You can skate by for a long time when the focus and attention is on somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yes, we are the lucky ones. We get to do the work, the hard work, the lucky, unlucky, blessed. It really is a blessing to be able to do this. But unfortunately, not everybody's willing to show up for that.
Right. And I speak with people, lots of people, and they say, well, how did you change? And it's like, well, I did the work.
I say I'm doing the work.
I did the work and I'm doing the work. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same as we talk about with professionalism, right? We're always taking continuing education classes. We're always learning more. There's always new information. Well, I hope in my personal growth, in my continued work that I'm doing on this planet as a human, that also continues, right? Every day I meet someone or I'm around someone and it makes me better for that interaction or that experience. And I want to continue to grow and learn professionally, but especially personally. My family, I grow and stretch in our family every day. So that's the goal.
Yeah. And I think professional, spiritual, emotional, mental fitness is like going to the gym
Yes.
and working out and staying physically fit. You don't just get physically fit and like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't have to walk anymore or lift weights anymore.
yeah. I don't have to go to the gym or run or do anything. It's not, it doesn't work like that. We've got to, in every single area, we have to continue learning, continue growing. And the other thing is, by helping others is the best way for us to continue growing and learning and seeing ourselves in other people. That's been my experience.
Absolutely. And continue to stay in gratitude. Sometimes it's easy to take for granted what our lives look like today and the blessings that we have. And for me, working with families and remembering the struggle, helps me remember the blessings and to stay in gratitude for the life I fought so hard for and that I have today. And gratitude for me is a very big piece of my daily journey.
What are you grateful for today?
I am grateful for my family. I am grateful for my health, and I'm grateful for this conversation with you, Tim.
All right. I love it. Okay, let's talk about let's talk about individual recovery support services, which are the services that you that Hired Power focuses on. So what is a personal recovery assistant?
So a personal recovery assistant is, again, a professional support person that helps in a transition. So we enter in lots of different areas of transitions. We could be part of the intervention process. A personal recovery assistant, a sober coach, a sober companion could be sitting second chair in that intervention to accompany that person to the door of treatment at the end of the intervention, to safely see that they get from the door of that intervention to where they're going to. It could be a person that maybe you're in treatment and you've got to go to a court hearing, or there's a funeral in your family, or there's a reason that you have to walk out that door of treatment before you're ready. A personal recovery assistant is a certified, trained professional that can accompany you through those high acuity, high emotional periods and help support you and get you back into that door of treatment after that process. And they also can go home with you post treatment. So again, I believe wholeheartedly in treatment, in the need for treatment, in that stabilization period to get those core understandings and education and just that safe container to get sober and start healing. But at some point you've got to return home. And I equate it kind of to the Wizard of Oz, right? Happy, joyous, and free is that Emerald City. But the yellow brick road is full of witches and flying monkeys and poppy seeds. And, how do I get from A to B? And we leave treatment with a one-dimensional piece of paper that says, go to 90 meetings in 90 days, find a sponsor, live in sober living, find a therapist, find a marriage counselor, see a psychiatrist, a whole list of things that are getting more and more complex, by the way. Our clients are getting more and more complex. Our patients are getting more and more complex. And so having someone accompany you down that road and help guide, support, and mentor you through those early days of recovery as you really build new skills and implement what you've learned into treatment into an action plan. Recovery is action, right? Recovery isn't our thoughts. It's, our thoughts are still sometimes in circles. And as you said, you've got 70,000 thoughts that you had every day the day before. And how do you make those new thoughts into actions? So a personal recovery assistant, we say there's 6 principles: guide, support, mentor, report, advocate, and collaborate. So that is the role, and that is how we aid people into early recovery.
I love it. And also, also that, yeah, that's great. And the other thing too is, it does, one of the things I learned early on, it doesn't matter how I feel. It matters what I do.
Right. The action.
It's the action. And also Tim needs to listen to somebody besides Tim.
Right. Because Tim got you right where you were in the first place. Yeah.
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 My best thinking got me where I was. And I hear so often people say, no, I just need to, I need to go, I need to go with my feelings. It's like the way that you're thinking got you where you are today. So we got to listen to some other people that have what we want.
Right. Right. That have walked the walk, that understand the journey and understand the process that they're beginning to go through.
Yeah. Recovery is transformation.
It is.
Transformation. It's not easy.
And it's teachable moments, small little teachable moments, what is the next thought and what do I do and how do I put that into action? And I don't feel like getting out of bed. But if I have someone saying, you got to get out of bed, let's get in the shower, let's go, you're more apt to get out of bed than if I'm laying there thinking, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to go to that meeting. I don't want to go see those people. I don't feel good today. I don't look good today. We all have those 9,000 reasons why we can't do the next right thing. So having someone walking beside us, whether it's a personal recovery assistant, whether it's a sponsor, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a sober living, there's lots of paths to recovery and there's lots of support available out there. It doesn't have to be one way, but just be willing to open yourself to a way to get that support.
Right. And alcoholics and drug addicts like to isolate, and we can always rationalize and what I've always learned is when I don't feel like going to a meeting is when I need to go to a meeting. When I don't want to call my sponsor is when I need to call my sponsor. When I don't want to pick up the phone is when I need to pick up the phone. Those are the times when I really need to take action.
Yeah. And having, helping someone create a list. What are those things you can do when you can't seem to get into action? Sometimes it's like, okay, just get up and take a shower, or, okay, just get up and walk outside and look at the water, or just get up and make yourself a cup of coffee. It's all an action. It's just that initial action to get going, just like recovery, right? It takes that initial first action. And that is day after day, action after action, that gets us into long-term recovery.
Right. And I think us being programmed to live our life a certain way, and we have the same thoughts every single day, it's so easy just to revert back to our old behavior. That's easy. The path of least resistance is just to go back to doing what we were doing, which is why we need an additional layer of accountability and support. That's going to be helpful. Now, one of the things that I spoke with you about previously was people paying for sober companion or recovery support services. It's not free. And why is that? Why is it appropriate to charge for those services?
So that's a great question, Tim. I mean, in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, it's free. That is a free program. Sponsorship is giving back. It's part of our recovery. It's part of our program. It's part of our own journey. So sponsorship is for free and for fun. That's why the delineage between peer recovery and professional support are different. That's why we had to create the professional standards, the professional ethics, the education, the training, the certification, because we can go to an AA meeting and we can get peer support and we can get guidance. but they're not professionals. They're someone walking along that journey with us. A professional is someone who has additional education, training, and experience, and that you're going to pay and hire them for that service, just like you hire any other. My friend might be good at doing taxes and might help me do my taxes, but I probably want a professional to look over those taxes if I've got anything more complicated than a general, W-2 and tax form, right? When I was 16 and I was 18, someone could do my taxes for me and it was easy. But life gets more complicated. People with addiction and mental health, our struggle, our recovery is more complicated. And needing a professional to guide us requires that, and professionals are paid.
So there have been many new forms of accountability and support developed over the past several years, including SoberLink, technology-assisted care, DNA drug testing. So of all of these new things that have been developed, what do you think has been the most effective?
Is there a most effective? I think it's a combination, Tim, like we just talked about. People are getting more and more complicated. There is no, I don't know, there's no such thing as just a standard good old alcoholic. There's
Right.
depression, there's anxiety, there's family systems, there's work complications, and there's a lot of things that need to be brought to the table for solutions. So these technologies, at home DNA testing saved a lot of people during the pandemic when they couldn't go to the labs, they couldn't get out. We started using that testing in January, right before the pandemic, unknowing that this was going to happen. And our clients were seamlessly able to continue their random testing. They were able to receive coaching. We have a platform called the Coach Connect. So virtual coaching, that app was available to them through the pandemic. SoberLink, having that breathalyzer, handheld small device, that can be used 4 to 6, 8 times a day to really support recovery. We were talking about my father-in-law before we got on this show. Unfortunately, he just passed, but he got sober at, 76 years old, 75 years old. And he went through a treatment program, and then he went on to SoberLink. And as recommended, he did a year of support of SoberLink, a year of monitoring and aided recovery. And at a year, the family said, okay, you don't have to do that anymore. And he said, bullshit. I need this. I need this for me. I need this to be accountable. And he used that SoberLink till the day he passed away as his own support mechanism, as his own self-accountability. He wanted to be accountable to himself as well as to his family. And so you're right, there's so many tools. There's virtual apps, there's DNA testing, there's SoberLink device, there's coaches and companions, and 100 different ways for people to get support while getting sober, while getting well with mental health. And we have to be those advocates. We have to be those people talking about it and making people aware that there's so many resources now to aid in recovery. It's incredible. It's amazing what we can now bring to families and to clients to support their journey and really help them get into long-term recovery.
Absolutely. There's so many different forms of accountability and support. And that's what it's all about. The more accountability, the more support you can offer. And it looks different for everybody. Whether they go to sober living, they don't go to sober living, they go home and they get a SoberLink device and they get a coach with Coach Connect with some sort of a technology assisted care, which has GPS tracking on it. And like, there's all these different things you can do. And the purpose of all of these things, I like to point this out, is it's not because we want to catch people drinking. It's not because we want to catch them doing drugs. It's not because we want to catch them at the bar. It's all preventative. All of it is preventative.
And supportive.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, it's supportive.
Creating accountability builds responsibility. If it brings back into their life the things they've lost, that addiction, drug use, mental health has taken from them. That accountability and responsibility brings things back into their life. It is a support system, it is an aid, and it is a blessing for them.
Absolutely.
And you're very right, they don't see it that way in the early time, and often families don't see it that way.
Right.
But some of those services allow the families to step away from the policing, to step away from the unhealthy boundaries and the unhealthy communication that they had with their loved one when their loved one was using. It allows them to step back and maintain or learn how to communicate effectively and healthy, because they don't have to be the cocaine police, the alcohol police. They don't have to be searching their house for alcohol or smelling their breath or looking at their pupils, because there are professional services and tools that do that for them. And they can just stand back and be the wife or the husband or the mom or the dad,
Right.
And I think it's a very important tools to bring in. We started off talking about families. I want to circle around to talk about families, because the studies indicate individuals get well in family systems, and if the family systems can get well, the success rates are higher.
So one of the things I was thinking about when you were just talking is like SoberLink, for example, is it's 6 to 8 times a day people get breathalyzed. It's not like we're going to breathalyze you because we think you've been drinking. We're going to drug test you because we think that you've been using. They
Right.
get, like, if people that are at our sober livings, they get drug tested 2 times a week, every single week. It's random. It always happens. It's not because we think that they're drinking or using. It's just like that's what happens. Therefore, they know they're going to get tested. Same thing with SoberLink. They know they're going to get tested. And that's just one more reason for them. Like, I'm not going to be able to get away with this.
That's right. And their own accountability. They, like you just said, and like my father-in-law said, it helped him have a reason not to pick up, because I know in the next hour I'm going to have to breathe into that tube, and it's not going to go well for me,
Right.
And so it helps them create that own accountability for themselves. Yeah.
Let's talk about hired power. Tell me about hired power.
I love to talk about hired power. So,
I bet you do.
Yeah. So Hired Power was founded in 2002. It is a transition service. So we work in the community. We work nationally and internationally, as you said, with clients and families, other professionals, other treatment, trying to support clients as they're beginning their journey. So it could be a mental health journey, it could be substance use disorder, process addiction, eating disorders. We're working with clients and families across all of those spectrums. And we provide transition services. So interventions, safe passage, helping people get to the door of treatment, whether it's from home or the hospital or jail. And then we go home and have services that support them in early recovery post-treatment. So as we talked about earlier, personal recovery assistance, the Coach Connect, our virtual app coaching program, the monitoring program that is that daily accountability, building accountability and responsibility, the coaching and companioning, going into people's homes, helping them be that teachable moment, those guides and mentors that are helping people put into action that early recovery, new thoughts, skills, ideas. So we support recovery, we support healing, and we're community based in most situations.
And how can people learn more about Hired Power? Where can they find you? How can they connect with you?
So we have a great new website. We just launched a brand new version of our website. So it's easy, Hired Power. And I always tell everyone, hired like you're hiring someone for a job, HIRED. A lot of people want to say higher power. And I tease and say only my husband gets to call me God, but he doesn't think that's so. It's Higher Power, and you can find us online or our 800 number, which is 800-910-9299.
Is there a question that you've always wanted to be asked, but the interviewer never got around to it? If so, what would that question be?
A question I always wanted to be asked. That's a good question, but I thought about that last night, and I had that answer last night, but I don't have it this morning.
Okay.
So not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, awesome. Well, we're coming up here to the end of the show, and I think that's all we have. And Nanette, I really enjoyed talking with you today. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I appreciate all the work that you do. I appreciate all the work that Hired Power does. You guys work with treatment centers, interventionists, as you said, in California, all over the country, and internationally.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me today. And I always enjoy speaking with you and the work that you do and the work at Camelback Recovery. So thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thanks. And thanks everybody for listening. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.